In this life, every person we meet is a teacher. Some teach us how to love, others teach us how not to be. There are moments when your light will attract the darkness. And in the clash between empathy and ego, a silent war begins. Most people misunderstand sensitivity. They think it is fragility, something to be ashamed of, something to hide or suppress in a world that praises hardness and noise. But this misunderstanding comes from those who do not yet know themselves. Sensitivity is not weakness. Sensitivity is awareness. It is the ability to perceive what others miss, to feel what others ignore, to understand what lies beyond words. A sensitive person does not simply hear, they listen. They do not just look, they see. And in that there is great strength. A super emperor is someone who has journeyed deep within. They have met their own pain, sat with it, breathed through it, and emerged with clarity. This clarity becomes their power. Because what most call being too emotional is often a sign of depth, and depth is not chaos. It is a still lake that reflects truth. The super empath can sense when energy shifts in the room. They know when someone's smile is hiding sorrow. They can feel dishonesty not by logic, but by intuition. This is not magic. This is mastery of awareness. In the presence of a narcissist, this sensitivity becomes a mirror. The narcissist who survives through illusion cannot bear reflection. The empath does not need to fight. They simply see. And in being seen, the narcissist feels exposed. Their masks falter. Their control begins to slip, because control only works in unconsciousness. When you bring light to manipulation, it dissolves. It cannot survive in clarity. The empath, however, does not expose others out of pride. They do not wield their sensitivity like a sword. They hold it like a lamp. They are not interested in humiliation or revenge. They are interested in truth. They are interested in peace. They want understanding, not dominance. But in a world where many fight for attention, the one who holds inner stillness becomes unshakable, and that stillness becomes their quiet power. It takes great discipline to feel deeply and yet not be moved by every emotion. It takes practice to care without losing oneself in another storm. But this is the path. The super empath learns to hold space for themselves and for others. And when they do, they become immovable. Like a mountain during a storm, they remain grounded. They understand that being sensitive does not mean being reactive. It means being aware, choosing when to act and when to let go. The world does not need more hardness. It needs more depth, more presence, more stillness. The super empath embodies all of this. Not because they want to appear powerful, but because they have learned that real strength never shouts, it simply is. And once you realize that your sensitivity is your strength, you no longer try to hide it. You protect it, you cultivate it, and you walk forward. Not seeking to overpower others, but to master yourself. While the narcissist clings to illusions, the empath rests in awareness. One seeks to control the world around them. The other simply observes it. The narcissist is constantly feeding a hollow identity. To maintain this illusion, they must manipulate the perceptions of others. Praise is extracted through charm. Doubt is implanted through gaslighting. Their world is one of distortion, projection, and control. They do not relate to others as equals, but as extensions of themselves, tools to be used, mirrors to be polished, or threats to be silenced. The moment another person sees clearly, the narcissist feels exposed. And there is no greater fear for them than exposure. This is where the empath becomes a silent force. An empath does not fight with noise. They do not enter the battlefield of ego and illusion. They simply reflect truth. And this truth is unbearable to those who live in lies. When the narcissist distorts reality, the empath does not argue, they stay calm. When the narcissist provokes chaos, the empath does not react, they observe. The more composed the empath remains, the more frustrated the narcissist becomes, because their manipulation cannot take root in ground. To someone driven by ego, peace is confrontation, stillness becomes rejection. The narcissist tries to break the empath, to twist their mind, to spark emotional responses they can use. But the empath, having learned self-mastery, does not take the bait. They hold up a mirror, not to punish but simply to see. In doing so, they reveal the one thing the narcissist fears most, the truth of who they are. And this truth is not delivered with judgment or aggression, it is revealed through presence. Presence is the quiet power of someone who knows themselves. It is the energy of someone who no longer needs to explain, justify or defend. The empath does not fight the narcissist, they simply stop playing the game. And this non-participation becomes the deepest wound to the narcissist ego. They cannot manipulate what they cannot touch. Over time, the narcissist's tactics become ineffective. Their words fall flat. Their charm loses its pull. The empath's refusal to be controlled becomes a silent rebellion. Not because they hate the narcissist, but because they have chosen clarity over confusion, reality over illusion. When you embody truth, you do not need to fight falsehood. You only need to remain unmoved. This unmoving awareness is what dissolves manipulation without conflict. The narcissist may scream, beg, or rage, but none of it can penetrate someone who has returned to their center. In the end, the empath tortures the narcissist not by attacking them, but by freeing themselves. And in that freedom, the narcissist is left to face what they have long avoided, their own reflection. Peace is misunderstood by many. It is often seen as passivity, as weakness, as surrender. But true peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the mastery of it. It is the ability to stand in the middle of chaos and not be shaken. For the empath, peace becomes the most potent form of resistance, the most profound form of strength, and for the narcissist, it becomes the most unbearable punishment. The narcissist thrives on reaction. They plant seeds of doubt and confusion, waiting for the emotional eruption. They feed on attention, whether it comes in the form of admiration or anger, your rage, your fear, your need to explain. All of it becomes fuel. They are not after love. They are after control. And the moment they sense they no longer have it, they panic because their identity is built on domination, not connection. Now imagine what happens when the empath no longer reacts, when they no longer explain, when they no longer try to be understood or try to understand. The narcissist who once had power through emotional chaos now faces silence. A stillness they cannot manipulate. A space where their games no longer work. And in this space they suffer, not because the empath harms them, but because the empath refuses to be harmed. Peace, in this sense, is not soft. It is sharp. It cuts through illusion. It exposes without a word. It leads the narcissist alone with their own reflection, stripped of control. They cannot provoke what has become untouchable. They cannot twist what no longer bends. They cannot dominate what no longer participates. And the empath, once pulled into emotional storms, now stands like a mountain. Not cold, but unmoving. Not angry, but detached. It is not hatred that creates this stillness. It is wisdom. A knowing that engaging in the game only fuels the cycle. That peace is not something you ask for from the world, it is something you build within. To maintain that peace is the highest form of self-respect. It means valuing your energy so deeply that you do not spend it trying to change what does not wish to grow. It means realizing that not every battle deserves your presence, and not every loud voice deserves a response. In this silence, the narcissist is defeated. Not by words, not by conflict, but by absence. The absence of drama, the absence of attention, the absence of submission. When this absence becomes louder than any confrontation, it becomes a mirror they cannot break. The empath's peace becomes a fortress, not built with walls, but with awareness. Not guarded by anger, but by clarity. And from this place, no attack can reach, no manipulation can twist, no illusion can deceive. This is the power of peace. It does not scream, it does not fight, it simply remains. And in that stillness, it brings everything falls to the surface and lets it fall apart on its own. There is a silent power in walking away, not in anger, not in desperation, but in clarity. When the empath chooses to leave the dynamic with the narcissist, something profound happens. It is not just the end of a relationship or a conversation. It is the breaking of a cycle that was never built on truth. It is the moment the empath reclaims what was slowly being drained: energy, identity, peace. The narcissist believes they are the center of gravity. They think others orbit them, pulled by their charm, their control, their games. When someone escapes that pull, it shatters the illusion they depend on. The empath's growth then becomes the greatest defeat, not because it harms the narcissist, but because it exposes their irrelevance. To the empath, growth is not loud, it is not announced. It is quiet, internal, steady. It begins with awareness, recognizing the manipulation, the confusion, the emptiness. Then it deepens with acceptance, not of the narcissist's behavior, but of the truth that no amount of love, effort, or patience can awaken someone who refuses to see themselves. And so the empath stops trying, stops fixing, stops shrinking to fit into someone else's story, and begins writing their own. This process of rising, of evolving, is painful at first. It means letting go, not just of the narcissist, but of the need to be seen by them, understood by them, valued by them. It means grieving the illusion of connection and embracing solitude. But within that solitude, something new begins to grow: strength, clarity, direction. The narcissist, watching from a distance, cannot understand this. They only know power through control, through proximity. But the empath no longer needs to explain their distance. Their silence becomes a message, their absence a mirror. The narcissist is left alone, not with the empath's anger, but with their own emptiness. And that emptiness cannot be escaped. This cannot be blamed on anyone else. It is the silence they created. And now they must sit with it. The empath, on the other hand, continues to rise. Not because they want revenge, not because they want to prove something, but because they have remembered who they are. They begin to build a life based on truth, not illusion, on self-respect, not sacrifice, on presence, not performance. And this growth, the quiet unfolding of inner strength, is what a narcissist cannot stand, because it reveals what they never had: real power. Power rooted in self-awareness, power that cannot be taken, only cultivated. The empath's evolution is not just personal. It is symbolic. It proves that freedom is possible, that healing is real, that no one, no matter how controlling, can stop someone who chooses to grow. So in the end, the empath doesn't need to hurt the narcissist. They only need to heal themselves. And that healing becomes the most powerful transformation of all. It is not revenge, it is rebirth. Mastery is not about defeating others. It is about no longer needing to. True mastery is silent. It does not announce itself, nor does it seek recognition. It lives in subtle choices, in the ability to remain steady while everything else pulls for reaction. When an empath reaches this state, they no longer seek to change the narcissist, nor are they shaken by their chaos. They have turned their focus inward, not as a form of escape, but as the only path that leads to freedom. The narcissist wants attention. They thrive on emotional volatility. If they cannot be loved, they will settle for being feared or needed. They push buttons, distort reality, and manufacture crises. All of this is designed to pull you into their world, where they write the rules, where they are always the center. And in the past, the empath may have entered that world willingly, trying to soothe, fix, explain, or calm. But over time, something begins to shift. The empath learns the value of their stillness. They realize that every time they react, they give energy. Every time they explain, they feed illusion. And so they stop. Not because they no longer care, but because they have learned to care more for their own balance than another's chaos. Mastery appears in that pause before responding, in the space between provocation and peace, in the moment where you could fight but choose not to. The empath starts to act, not out of fear or habit, but out of intention. They no longer need to be understood by someone who refuses to listen. They no longer need to be validated by someone who only sees themselves. This is not coldness, it is clarity. Like the martial artist who understands that the strongest stance is one that does not need to strike, the empath recognizes that their presence is enough. They do not seek to expose or destroy the narcissist. They simply become immune to the tactics that once worked. And this immunity is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is quiet, invisible, powerful. This kind of mastery is not easy. It requires deep self-discipline, self-acknowledge, and the willingness to let go of the need to win in the way the narcissist defines winning. The empath realizes that victory is not control over others, it is liberation from their influence. It is no longer being moved by the same manipulations, no longer needing to prove anything. It is peace with what is. And in this space, the narcissist begins to lose power, not because the empath attacked, but because the empath no longer responds. The game cannot continue if one player refuses to participate. The illusion collapses when it is no longer believed. This is the essence of mastery. No noise, no fight, just presence. And presence, when rooted in truth, becomes the one thing that cannot be twisted. It becomes the silent force that ends the cycle, not through force, but through understanding. There comes a moment in every empath's journey where the most difficult truth must be faced. You cannot save someone who does not want to be saved. The desire to heal, to nurture, to help, these are noble traits, but when given to the wrong person, they become chains. The empath often enters the relationship with pure intentions. They see the narcissist's pain behind the mask. They see potential. They see the child behind the armor. And so they stay, they endure, they give, hoping that love will be enough. But love is not always enough. Not when it is met with denial, manipulation, and emotional warfare. The narcissist does not want healing, they want control. They do not want to grow, they want others to shrink. So long as the empath continues to pour their energy into fixing what refuses to change, they remain trapped in an illusion. And in trying to lift another, they begin to sink. The true turning point is not loud. It does not come with a dramatic exit or confrontation. It comes in silence, in clarity. It comes when the empath finally understands that the highest form of love is not sacrifice, it is freedom. And freedom begins with letting go of the role of the savior. Not because the empath doesn't care, but because they finally care enough to choose themselves. Choosing oneself after a pattern of self-abandonment is an act of deep courage. It is not selfish, it is necessary. It means turning the same compassion that was once freely given outward and finally offering it inward. It means asking, what about my needs, my peace, my purpose? And in that asking, a door opens, a path appears. One that leads not into the pain of another, but into the discovery of the self. The empath begins to see that the true work is not outside of them, it is within. They no longer search for meaning in the narcissist's chaos. They begin to